Hey everyone, looks like CVE got a last minute stay of execution. We're going to discuss that and more. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi everyone, it's Alan Schimmel and it's Friday. Man, Friday couldn't come fast enough this week for me. I just, between the constant barrage of what goes on both in our country and in the rest of the world, what's going on in the tech world, what's going on in media and just everything. Man, I could use a weekend, and really happy we'll be starting our weekend after Techstrong TV, of course, today. And we're going to kick off our Techstrong TV day with, as usual, Techstrong Gang. Got a great gang to introduce you to today. Let me bring you to them. First of all, this feels like a repeat of yesterday from our West Coast contingent, right? Down in the Valley, we've got Lisa Martin. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
Hey, Alan, I'm great. Good to be here with you and the gang today.
Good to see you. And then high atop his secret perch at the very top of the Golden Gate Bridge, master of all that he sees, he's our tech editor at large, Jon Swartz. Hey, Jon, how are you?
I am good. It's good to see you, and I'm looking forward to today's show.
Excellent. Moving over to Colorado, where he's got the guitars up there, but his mind is on DevOps and Cloud Native, I think. He's Futurum VP analyst Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, how are you?
Good to be here. By the way, we need to change the name Techstrong Gang because that's likely to get us deported, being a member of a gang.
I don't have any tattoos. But that, look, wait, here's a masked man right at the door. No, let's.
Some people outside.
All right, Mitch, you're getting us started off on a Friday. I said it's been a tough week. I wanted to ease into it.
Turn it up.
And you're turning it up. Okay, there we go. Moving on from Mitch, he's got his passport with him. May or may not help him. He is our chief content officer, Mike, home from Dublin in Ireland, Mike Vizard. I guess they let you back in, huh, Mike?
They did, and it was very kind of them, and I'm very thankful, even though I am a U.S. citizen, and it's my right to be here, so it's kind of weird that we're all questioning whether or
Rights?
not
We don't have rights.
Again.
What are you kidding? Who said anything about rights? Anyway, all kidding aside, Friday, guys, we're going to kick it off. The cybersecurity world was in a bit of a tizzy a couple of days ago. The president of MITRE put out a letter talking about the imminent demise, perhaps, of the CVE. Mike, what do we got here?
So to your point, apparently the U.S. government took a long time to renew this contract under which MITRE's been managing this program forever. And people have a lot of faith and trust in both MITRE and have trusted the U.S. to kind of run this program. As a result, as far as I can tell, a lot of people are now talking about, well, this should not be a U.S.-led project because they're saying that the situation here is a little too unstable. People don't want to have a bunch of political decisions kind of driving some things. And so there is a conversation about moving this whole program or replacing it all together with something that is not CVE driven, simply because CVEs themselves are kind of difficult to track. There's tons of them, but they're not all equally severe, and people are complaining about the way the whole thing works anyway. Mitch, what's your take on this? Because CVEs are kind of the bane of application development existence.
Well, it may be the bane of software development, but it's also the kind of glue or the oil that runs security, because that's how we notify people about new vulnerabilities and the severity of them. And it's kind of the gold standard. It really is the gold standard of reference of, is this an issue? How serious is it? What are some of the remedies that we can take? Or what are the attack vectors, et cetera? I think it just shocked everybody because I didn't know that contract hadn't been renewed. MITRE has a number of contracts with the government. They've been around since the 1950s, actually. So they're a well-trusted, up to this point, brand. But it does show, the winds blow and change a different direction. What do you do? Now, the database is actually run by NIST. So the database still would be there. It's just no new CVEs would have been issued. But there was a diving catch in the end zone. I guess we'll talk about that to get it funded again, keep it going, I think, for about 11 months while they figure out a different funding source.
I got some thoughts on this one and some factual foundations here. So first of all, they're doing more than talking about. They're not talking about replacing CVEs because, as Mitchell says, CVEs are not just to the AppSec world, but even to the larger cybersecurity world. That's how we do every scanner, every vulnerability management tool uses the CVE system. So they're not talking about replacing the CVE. We're talking about replacing who pays for and maintains the CVE. Let's take it out of the hands of the US government. We can't trust them. And that's a disgusting comment on the state of our country. But unfortunately, it's the same thing you're hearing throughout the world. We are no longer a stable partner. Canada says it, Japan says it, Europe says it. We're not stable. We are chaos. And people they don't want to deal with that. So they founded something called the CVE Foundation. And it's going to be a not-for-profit foundation that if this ever happens again, we will tell the US government, thanks, but no thanks, we got it. Right? And that may be the best thing that happens here. Number two, the relationship between the CVE and the National Vulnerability Database. Think of the CVE as upstream from that database. Now, the CVE has been run by MITRE for as long as Mitch and I are in security, right? We have a lot of friends at MITRE. Rob, we used to always work with MITRE. And let's think about, for those of you who are not security people, who don't know how this works, whether you are a researcher in Kathmandu or Santa Clara or anywhere in between, and you find a vulnerability, you could submit to the CVE, and if it's accepted, it's assigned a number, right? A registration in that CVE database, and with it, all the information, right? How do you detect it? How do you patch it? Blah, 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 blah. You need one central repository for all of this. Now, some big research teams like Microsoft, they're given a range of CVE numbers because they find not many vulnerabilities, unfortunately. And so it's easier for them to get a number assigned to a particular vulnerability. That information, though, once the CVE is assigned and all the data, background information is collected, then makes its way into the National Vulnerability Database, which, as Mitchell said, is maintained by NIST. Now, if you speak to security people, they will tell you NIST hasn't been on top of their game, hasn't been for a couple of years. Because of budget cuts and priorities, the lag time between coming from a CVE, making its way into that National Vulnerability Database has stretched and stretched and stretched to the point that people are really frustrated by it. And again, questioning whether is NIST the right caretaker for this thing? Is the government the right caretaker for this thing? And so from the security professional's perspective, we already knew that the NVDB was tottering on collapse. It's so far down. And now we're going to cut off funding for the CVE base. This is double whammy, worst case scenario, right? This is perfect storm kind of stuff. Now, we spoke about it yesterday before the gang, or maybe the day before, with Kimberly and some of our other gang members. And they were saying, well, NIST don't fund it. No, NIST doesn't fund CVE. In this case, CISA came through. Now, CISA, as in Chris Krebs, who's being investigated because he said the election wasn't stolen. As in, who's the last lady who just left? She was head of CISA under Biden, Mitch, Marianne, whoever. I mean, CISA's done an amazing job of making the government relevant in cybersecurity, and they stepped in here. But make no mistake, they only funded this for 11 months.
Yes. Yeah, you know, I'm glad you mentioned it, Alan, because I have this dreaded sense of deja vu with this. I think Wired put it well in the headline. They said stupid and dangerous because we're not out of the woods. This last minute funding is just for
This is
several
going
more
to be
months.
like raising the national debt. You want me to fund CISA or CVE? I need a comparable cut somewhere else. Who the hell? Once you make this a political football, it is
Right. It's like
dangerous.
they're kicking the can down the road. It's like the determining the fate of TikTok. They just keep extending it, and I think we're gonna have a crisis every year. I hope I'm wrong, but there's just already news that CISA is going to be facing significant reductions
They
across
are.
most of its, including the contractors. Already started,
Yep.
and it's this more cost cutting or reckless cost cutting.
Well, the fact is, MITRE laid people off because of this and now has to go back hiring them. You know, our friend Chase Bannon, who's on the gang frequently, she works at MITRE. I'm not saying she told me anything, but it's been chaos over there. Chaos.
So they've been canceled. So several contracts have already been terminated within
Yes.
the agency or
Yes.
left to lapse.
Yes.
So now we've got this. You get rid of people, then you realize, oh my God, we need them. This is just. I mean, it sounds sounds familiar.
But this is the Doge way.
Exactly.
You know, they fire and then they aim. It's bass backwards, and that's the way our government is being set up to work. But so the bottom line here is as much as it pains me to say, let's take CVE away from the US government. We don't have enough adults in that room to run this thing. Go with this CVE foundation, put adults in. It's too important to mess around with.
That was what struck me. The CVE system may not make headlines. It's not a sexy thing from a marketing perspective, but it's such an important pillar of modern cybersecurity. And so I thought, should a resource that countries and security analysts around the world rely on be tied to a single government sponsor? Question mark, question mark, question mark. That was the thing that really popped out at me is that's a central theme here that needs to be addressed.
And to that point, Lisa, you know, I think we're in the realm of potentially anything that the US proposes. We'll set this up and we'll run it. We'll do whatever, whether it's 6 or 12 or, 24 months from now. I think the world's reaction is going to question that. Maybe we don't want you to do that. Well,
We're
let's
not
start
trustworthy. But
let's start
there is
this as a
precedent
foundation
here.
or whatever.
There's precedent here. Let me explain something to you guys. When I first got involved in the internet, commercial, internet, when it became viable, 96, something like that, 95, the entire DNS system and domain name system was run by the US government. It was a US government entity that assigned you your IP address and kept the domain registry. Right? Then they formed a company called Network Solutions. I was lucky enough to have Network Solutions as a strategic investor in one of the companies I helped take public back in the .com days. Net Solutions. They eventually got bought by with a company that had big digital certificates and stuff. Spiro something was their CEO. Anyway, eventually the world decided that the domain registry needed to be global and it needed to have its own independence from any government entity. And what we have today, ICANN, if you're familiar, right? You've heard of ICANN, ICANN. They run the domains and they run the DNS lookups and all these things. So this is not without precedent to yank it from the government and set it up, in a not-for-profit type of worldwide foundational.
Yeah, the DoD, I think, did the original domain.
Well, DARPA.
Before it went to,
exactly. DARPA
before it went to Network Solutions.
Yeah.
But let's be honest here. There are a lot of people who have lost faith in CVEs and they complain about the severity rankings. And
that's
no,
CVSS, Mike. That's CVSS, not CVE.
Well, no, they're also complaining about
They
the
do. But you know
and
what? There's always
and
going
the
to be
basic, let me
complainers.
finish. The basic complaint is that maybe these guys don't have enough funding to actually review these things, and they're over ranking these things and creating more havoc for people. And you'll hear open source maintainers, I mean, quite literally bitch and moan about CVEs, that they're like, none of that stuff is really executable in the first place because too many cybersecurity researchers are looking for, you know, marks on a belt to find a vulnerability. And it's like, a lot of those vulnerabilities in those CVEs are not nearly as severe as they make them out to be. That's a fact.
Yeah, we've been hearing that shit forever. They're not nearly severe as they make them out to be until someone breaks in using it.
Can I ask a question about? I don't mean to be alarmist, but if there was a sudden interruption in services, what are the likelihood of this bubbling up into a national security problem very
Exactly.
quickly?
That was another thought I had.
Do you realize, wait a second, do you realize that every agency that this Doge thing it goes into, when they're done, they're leaving the back door open, the windows open, and the lights on. You want to talk about a national, I read an article on this very subject this morning, that the MO here is Doge goes in, they do what they got to do to plunder the data that they want, fire the people that are there, and then they leave everything wide open. And lo and behold, if you go look at a DNS lookup of site of access to these agencies immediately after Doge leaves, where do you think those IPs are coming from? China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. Some think that this is just a plot, a conspiracy theory. There's a conspiracy theory that this is a plot by Trump and Musk to open things up to China. Our security from a national level is flashing red. It's flashing red. CVE's a tip of it. It's flashing red. Most of these agencies, they're watchdogs, their security, and most security, by the way, comes from consultants and the Accentures and so forth of the world, SAICs and all of them. They're gone. This thing is, it's a catastrophe. It's not waiting to happen. It's happening.
It's really disappointing, Alan, because this is, of all the areas of government, cybersecurity is one where there's been a real conscious effort over the last 15 years to get the private-public relationship going, sharing information, sharing threats, and investigating things. And CVEs are one example, but there's a lot of other things. And that's all getting ripped up. And what's going to replace it? There isn't something to replace it other than maybe going private, but then you've got to rebuild all those relationships under some private thing, and doesn't involve government people, if there are government people that are involved in security.
Oh, it's okay. And the industry will police itself and everything will be just fine. What do you, I mean,
but this is why I said, guys, Friday night can't come fast enough for me this week. It's scary times. Scary times. Anyway, let's take a break here on Techstrong Gang. Mike, what do you got that's like feel good for today for us? Anything good?
I do. The next one up is a little bit on the feel good side.
So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
All right, folks, we're back with something, well, hopefully lighter, but as always, everything to do with AI has a double-edged sword to it. But Amazon, AWS specifically, has a thing called Amazon Q Developer, a set of agents that will let you or help you write code, review the code, test the code, etc. And now they're making that available in many more languages around the world. And one of the attributes of that is that it will allow developers who speak different languages to understand the intent of a comment better, because the AI will convert a comment made in French into English, or English into Arabic, or into Spanish, or whatever it may be. And we could have global teams of developers working more collaboratively together. At least that's the idea. I think this is a positive thing for mankind, but anything to do with globalization these days is also fraught with controversy, because, well, folks are saying, well, that will just facilitate more jobs moving to a different country from another country. The politics of that have always been there. But Mitch, what's your take on what's going on here? Do you think this is going to help development, or people will just kind of stay in their international lanes, as it were?
I mean, I think it's mostly good because you're opening up more accessibility, right, to these tools. So you can, talk in Arabic or whatever your speaking language is. I think they added like Arabic and French and German, number of others. So it makes it accessible to many more people. It makes prompt sharing a little challenging. If somebody's sending me an Arabic prompt and I can't read it, don't know what it says, I guess maybe I could get Google Translate to translate it. Hopefully it does it accurately. But it does bring up the semantics of each language are different, but that's what these AI models, generative AI does well. So I think it's a good thing overall. It does, English being kind of the universal tech language that things are based on. We've really enjoyed that maybe too much as the thing to fall back on. And this may mean that it's shifting. Yes, the young man in the back there raising his hand.
I've got a real problem here. Didn't our glorious leader just sign an executive order making English our official language? We're going to start taking things out of English. What's next? DEI? Equal rights for gays? This is un-American. And I think we should have the FTC pull Amazon's card.
It's clearly Friday. You realize that today is
So
you
you're saying
realize
you want
today
to
is Good Friday, right?
you want to
We're supposed
doge Amazon? Is that what
Yeah,
you're
let's
saying?
doge Amazon. Send Elon over there.
Doge is now a verb, by the way.
Right?
I mean, all kidding aside, this is a great thing.
Yeah.
Right? Let's bring the world together. The whole world doesn't speak English. Even those people who speak English as a second language. When you go to Europe and you talk to people, you realize though they can do basic communications, there's a lot that gets lost in the translation, so to speak. And it's a great thing. Kudos to AWS.
So Lisa, in my mind, this is more of a high-minded thought, but I think when people, even when they have different languages, work together, it narrows their differences. So maybe, do you think, as we kind of move forward in the age of AI, other cultures become less mysterious, they become less foreign, and maybe we can have we refer to Star Trek a lot here in this show, but are we moving in that direction?
I think so. I think I saw this as a really positive step that AWS is taking, to enable developers worldwide to leverage Gen AI technologies to not only be more productive, but to some of the points already made, more collaborative, really helping to democratize software development. But to your point, maybe helping some cultures understand each other better, because this is going to allow developers across the world to share ideas more easily. So it's going to be an interesting side benefit, I think, Mike, to your point about cultures maybe not being erased, but maybe people become more open to embracing different cultures and understanding cultural differences for the greater good of software democratization and making the world a better place, and then ensuring we can, transact on Amazon or whatever we want in a real time, personalized, contextually relevant way. I think this could be very foundational, maybe not a primary message that came out here, but I think you bring up a really good point that it absolutely could be moving in that direction.
I just installed my universal translator. I have to be honest, I didn't understand a word you said. Can you do that again?
You need Lieutenant Uhura to help you with that.
Oh, wow. But so John, as you think about some of this, um, are companies in the way they operate going to be more global than they have been. And I would argue we've been talking about globalization forever, but when you look at it, it's really internationalization. All these companies have units that operate in different countries, but they're isolated from each other, really. Are we going to get to
Yeah.
real globalization?
Yeah, we were mind melding on this one. Yeah, I'm a fan of AWS because, in a sense, what they're doing is to steal a little bit from Lisa. It's more collaborative. It's across countries. We keep hearing all these generative AI, agentic AI announcements, and they all seem to be very Anglo focused. And what AWS is thinking is, let's peel back the layers. Let's look at other markets. Let's look at cross pollination. Let's expand the market and the playing field. And I think other companies are going to follow in their steps. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Mike, because you wrote the story, was if this is something that's unique to AWS or other companies doing it, because I'm not aware of it. But I think yeah.
I think it's going to be a capability that just about everybody has. And that's going to be the interesting part about it, because despite what governments might be saying, I think people will naturally kind of gravitate towards each other and find ways to work together. And we may get a movement where people just say, I don't really care what the government's saying about X, Y, Z. There's, four people in another country I like working with, and here we go.
Exactly. Given the footprint of these companies too, and in a sense, what's at stake, and I'm not going to go down the tariff. We'll go down the tariff lane in the next segment, but this is a major market opportunity, and AWS. If there's one thing they do really well, and Lisa can attest to this, it's just like thinking bigger and thinking
Yeah.
wider.
Mhm.
Yes. And this is a great example of that.
I vote we just go back to Latin. I think that would solve it.
It used to be French, right? That was the international language before English, but
Yes, it was. All right. I'll stand by my MAGA on this. We're going to take a break. Let's come back and talk about, AMD is now online to build chips here with TSMC. Imagine that. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, folks, we're back, and this is more of one of those continuing stories, but AMD is now saying that they're going to manufacture chips in the US with a little help from their friends in Taiwan. My take on this is it seems like everybody's just kind of like standing up and saying this, but I get a little cynical about the whole thing, because I'm like, well, by the time you build a fab, there'll be another president. So, John, what's your sense of what's real here and what's not real?
So we did talk about this yesterday, and we talked about NVIDIA as a partner of TSMC, and we had the same misgivings or the same concerns. How long it takes to build a fab lab, get everything online, and by the time that happens, it's years down the line. And I will bring up Foxconn from the first administration of Trump, and it's something that's it's going to be an ongoing issue, but in a sense, AMD is trying to protect itself in terms of the supply chain, or in terms of what might happen with the tariffs. I understand they actually claim that they had planned to do this before any talk of the tariffs, that there was, of course, right? This was a press conference in Taipei with the CEO, Lisa Su, and it was their intention for us to believe that this is already in the works and that something will be produced by the year 2026. But again, when it comes to these types of stories, these numbers to me, in terms of the amount of money that's going to be spent, the timeline, the particular products, it's all kind of pie in the sky. I'm not going to say it's made up, but it seems fabricated to me, so to speak. Bad pun, I know. But these are things that continue to make me just wonder what they're trying to accomplish. I know what they're trying to accomplish is protect themselves. But I think they're trying to mollify people at the same time. I know, Alan, I know you're chomping at the bit, so
Yeah,
you
no,
go
it's
ahead.
not. Look, we discussed this yesterday. These new chips they're talking about are 2 nanometer technology chips. By TSMC's own admission, their 2 nanometer plant in Phoenix won't come online till at least 2028. And then you got to find people who could work there, or at least program the robots that'll work there. And so, what are you really talking? This is nonsense, right? This is
So years ago, Intel gave me the opportunity to go to one of their fab labs before it was opened, and it was in the Phoenix area. And they on this tour, just looking around, just looking at the amount of money and equipment and the amount of intricacy of what was going on there. It's a years-long process. So whenever I hear these stories about we're going to bring manufacturing back, no matter how simple or how complicated it is, I cannot stop laughing at the absurdity of these timelines that they keep giving us.
it is absurd. But let me say something though. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, right? You're assuming there will be a Taiwan.
Right, exactly.
When
Yeah.
China decides they're taking it back, and let's face it, we're not going to war over it in this administration. And they just tell TSMC, you no longer are going to work with them. You can have a lot of empty office space over there.
Mm-hmm. So, to that point, is this a Taiwan exit strategy, and is it viable? Will the Chinese wait for us to go build these fabs, or will they just decide that they'll
Well,
take
they're
Taiwan?
nice guys. They
Well-
want to see us succeed. Why wouldn't they wait? Come on.
Until we start
I know
building
it's
it.
Friday, but Mitch, what's
Yeah.
the saying? I was born at night, but not last night. What?
It's
How
not
does that
last
go?
night.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
exactly right.
But the Chinese are known for taking their time, and they have the long view, and maybe they're going to say, look, the manufacturing plants themselves aren't worth all that much, and they just want the island back because to them it's a national issue.
You all are just making a big ass deal out of this thing and way overblowing it. I think if we just put this under the Infrastructure Week program, that'll make sure that it gets
I
We're
was
like
surprised
50%
by
a week.
sorry. I was surprised by the aggressiveness of the timeline because it doesn't make, and that they would put that message out. I guess they felt it looks better to say the chip's scheduled to roll out in 2026 out of Arizona, but if that plant isn't even going to be ready, I
Well,
just
no,
didn't
there
understand
are
why the
other
message.
chips. There are other. So one plant that makes the 4 or 5 nanometer chips, which are kind of older chips, I believe just became operational this month,
Okay, because they're talking about the Epic processors here,
March 5th.
saying they're
Right.
going to roll out
The
in
2
2026.
they clearly, and we discussed this in the last one with NVIDIA, the 2 nanometer won't be online till 2028.
Got
earliest.
it. Okay.
Of course, yesterday, what was it? Yesterday, I will reference the stock market and what happened to NVIDIA. So it all can just go puff in the sky when we have other extenuating circumstances or announcements made around tariffs, which happens conceivably every few hours at this point. So all this maneuvering can just be blown out of the water by some sort of random event. I mean, this is crazy. If I was a tech company right now, I'd be pulling my hair out trying to figure out what the hell are we going to do the next year or two with all this chaos around
Not
us.
just tech company, if you're any company. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
No, John referenced Foxconn and all of these announcements, not just chips, but I think a lot of the announcements, they are PR. They are kind of building favoritism. And yes, we're following through with what the administration wants. Will they ever really happen? What happened to the AI data centers that we were going to build all over the biggest infrastructure? That's we don't talk about that now. We talk about the next announcement. So it's just political evidence, quote unquote, meaning it's just hot air until something really happens to say we're doing what we said we would do.
I also wonder the following. I think it will happen not because of USA manufacturing, but more just as a national security issue, and people don't want our chips made somewhere else when and be held hostage by that. And I can wrap my head around that. But I'm also looking at these timelines and I'm like going, I wonder if the pace of innovation is going to be a lot faster than they think. And these 2 nanometer chips might be superseded by the next thing long before that factory comes online. So,
Well, if they won't trust us to run CVEs, are they going to trust what's made in the US? That's my question.
Well, no, because to make an iPhone, you just need a lot of people with little screwdrivers.
Yeah, I'm serious. Why would if I can't trust CVEs from the US government, why would I trust a government-sponsored chip manufacturer, located in the US? They may be gone tomorrow, or no, we're only supplying.
And by the
things
way,
to the federal
we've
government.
demonstrated no expertise in a very long time in this kind of manufacturing. Again, I mentioned it yesterday. I read an article and I listened to a podcast with Thomas Friedman from the Times, who spoke about that we need to do to China what China did to us, which was 25 or more years ago. They looked at what the U.S. does well and what the U.S. didn't do well. And what the U.S. didn't do well, China put a all balls to the wall effort to do well, to do fantastic what we don't do well.
They also got really good at copying things, right?
Yeah. But
Doing
they
it much
saw
more
what
cheaply.
we don't do well, and they started doing it well, knowing that because we don't do it well, we would be dependent on that. Well, we need a comparable program here. And it may take 10, 20 years for us to develop that kind of expertise. And the problem is our system is set up as such that we don't have 10-year, 20-year outlooks. We live quarter to quarter.
We can't do it. We can't do it based on the 4-year terms. The weird thing too is with the Chinese, they think long term, and right now I think what Xi meant with the leaders of the biggest tech companies, and they're talking about automation throughout manufacturing because they have a huge shortage of people who will work or willing to work in manufacturing. Meanwhile, on the flip side, we've got an administration that's convinced everybody wants to work on a manufacturing line, which is pure inanity. Who would rather? I mean, this whole argument goes back to the first administration when Cohn was the Treasury Secretary. He would try to make the argument that who wants to work in manufacturing when they can work in an air-conditioned office that's much safer and pays better? So in a sense, we just never seem to learn.
Not to mention that today's factories don't have a lot of assembly line jobs. Look at Tesla. So, well, we could talk till we're blue in the face.
What did the Chinese spokesman say? We've been here for 5,000 years. We're going to be here for 5,000 more.
Yeah.
That was their attitude.
Mike, could we go to a pub for Friday night?
We can. But I think it's Good Friday though, so we're supposed to have fish today.
That's true. It's good. All right, so we could order fish and chips.
There you go. Fish and chips in a pub. I could be behind that.
All right. Hey, let's call it a wrap on this version of Techstrong Gang. For those of you who are celebrating Good Friday and Easter this Sunday, happy holidays. Passover is still going on, so happy holidays and Passover to you as well. Chag Sameach, as they say. And God willing, if some masked men don't cart us all away, we'll be back on Monday to continue this discussion about what's going on in your world. But stay tuned for the rest of Techstrong TV. We've got a full lineup as usual. But for now, this is Alan Schimmel, and we're out.